The US military recently opened up its first drone school for small quadcopters. I mean, drones should be part of basic training in the US military, and I doubt in Canada we're very far ahead of them. There should be more drones than soldiers and I'm not talking about AI enabled drones. I'm not talking about any of the Psycraft technology, just with normal pilot flown quadcopter drones. There should be one per soldier at least, and there isn't, and there's no plans on adopting that. And you could say, well, maybe we have different needs than the Ukrainians or whatever. I think that will sound a lot like the French saying that their uniforms look way nicer than the British uniforms if it ever comes to a serious conflict.
The Research Labs podcast by SundayPyjamas.
Very excited for this conversation. I've been trying to think through, what we could cover in the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, like, listening to you and your co-founder talk in UFT at the event about the ethics of starting a defense company. I, as I mentioned right in the event itself, I found the choice of the topic very interesting, and I
Mm-hmm.
was very amused by the approach that you guys are taking. So, without me trying to understand what Psycraft is and how you are trying to build the company, maybe could you give us a sense as to what Psycraft is doing and how you are trying to shape the company every week?
That's a great question. I think that Psycraft started 3.5 years ago with an idea. And the idea was basically that in the world of tech, in the world of academia, which is where I come from, I was doing a PhD in physics, and just in the world of high society in general, there is an unwillingness to work in the defense industry, certainly outside of certain countries like the United States. The defense industry is seen as just something that people don't want to work in. And it's also seen as an industry that you can't just start a startup. And this is a reaction I got from certain people when I said that I had this idea. They're like, you can't make a fighter jet in your basement. And it's true. You can't make a fighter jet in your basement. You can't make most things in defense industry in your basement because most things that the defense industry builds are very expensive and complicated. So yeah, you can't just start a startup that does that sort of things. I mean, there are startups like SpaceX that have gone, into those very high barrier to entry industries, but SpaceX was founded after Elon Musk had already made a lot of money, so it was very well funded when it started. I'm a first time founder. It sounds difficult, but we are living in an age of changing technology, and with changing technology, there are opportunities. And so it was in 2021 that I first started thinking about this. And one thing that I saw back then was AI, and that back then I thought AI seems like it's something that's going to have a really big impact on the world. I was working actually on research in physics. I was working on problems applying AI to problems in quantum process tomography, which is related to quantum computing. And at the time and to a degree now, quantum computing was seen as something that is going to change the world. So was AI. AI was still big back then, but of those two things, quantum computing and AI, I saw much more opportunity in AI as a really proven technology compared to quantum computing. So this was in 2021. This was before the war in Ukraine broke out or escalated, depending on how you want to call that. This was also before. It was before the war in Gaza. It was before a lot of the tensions around Taiwan. So I saw, though, even back then, that there's this increasing tension in the world, and that the world is unfortunately becoming a more dangerous place. And when you're confronted with danger, you can either ignore it, you can avoid it, or you can try to mitigate it. And that's what we're trying to do. And then with respect to the technology and with respect to AI, this was before ChatGPT was released. But as someone who's a little bit more of an insider, I could see that there's really something to this. This isn't just hype. It isn't just a bubble. Anything can become a bubble. I mean, there was a dot-com bubble in the 90s, and just because that burst, it didn't mean that people stopped using the internet. But I think ChatGPT has proven that the sky really is the limit when it comes to AI. And so I started working on AI and applying AI solutions to the defense industry. And now we are, fully operational as a startup, and we are right, positioned at exactly the place that a lot of people would like to be right now, because now a lot of other people have seen the potential of AI, have seen the danger in the world due to political developments, and are interested in investing in companies that are working on the cutting edge of defense. But the thing about AI, I said before, I was talking about building a fighter jet in your basement. You can't build a fighter jet in your basement, but we're not a defense company building fighter jets. We're not building anything at all, at least nothing physical. We are a software company. AI is a type of software, but we're open to lots of different ideas, and we're building AI and related software, and that is something that startups can actually get involved in. And I think that that DeepSeek, which came out last year, proves that even startups can compete with the big players in the field of AI. And so that's what we plan on doing, but applied to the defense industry.
Clearly, I think since 2021, since you first thought about it, there has been a lot of progress that have been made. As you mentioned, the system is actually deployed
Hmm.
in the real, I would say, warfare scenario now. At the same time, a lot of things are changing from the political standpoint, even in Canada,
Yeah.
especially recently. But before we, go into all of that juicy things, could you maybe talk about how were the first 3 months, 6 months of building a product and testing it out and trying to think about what tangents to take the product into, like coming to a scenario where the system is actually deployed. That's what that is where the company is today. But if you could give us a sense as to how challenging it can be for a first time founder, especially in a space such as defense.
The defense industry is different from a lot of industries. We're not able to just deploy systems like that. We can't just put it on the App Store and launch it. So I didn't take 3 months or 6 months. I took years, years of trial and error, years of developing different sorts of ideas before I landed on Preysight, which is our computer vision suite. It's computer vision that is trained to detect battlefield relevant targets, and it is also designed to be deployed on small embedded devices, aka robots, including drones. The experience is, I think it's just a lot of hard work. You just have to work really hard all the time, and you're always solving a problem. Every day is another interesting problem to solve. But at the end of the day, nothing substitutes for hard work.
Right.
And if you're not prepared to work hard on something, then you should find something else that is more compelling to you. But for me, every single day when I work on everything that we do, I always think about those people who are on the front lines right now, who are suffering in trenches, who are being killed, who are being injured, who are being taken away from their families for long, long, long periods of time, taken away from their careers. There's a lot more than just people being killed in combat. There's a lot more sacrifice that goes into it. And I think to myself, what am I doing? I'm just sitting in front of a desk, developing technology. I mean, this is fun. I like doing this. And I've done more than just develop the technology, of course. I am the CEO, but compared to what some people are going through, this is nothing. This is really nothing. If anything, I owe it to those people for their sacrifice to do something that can help alleviate that. Because our mission at Psycraft is to develop technology that can ultimately keep people safe and protect people. We're not trying to develop technology to hurt people. It can, but its purpose is to keep people safe and to keep people away from the front lines and to replace their jobs with robots and to develop the software that allows that to happen. And so, what does it matter the hours I put in, the money I put in? If I can even save one person's life, it would be worth 6 months, 3 years, however, whatever amount of work it would be, because that's one person that gets the chance to live a full, long life, to go back to their families. And I know that if I was in that situation, that's what I would want.
I would say that really reflects very deep embedded values and the culture that you are trying to build, so that everyone who is joining the company kind of understands the values and the stakes that the systems are going to be deployed in. Could you maybe share what discussions do you have internally with team members as to how to define the right culture inside the company, so that everyone who joins kind of has a sense of mission?
Hmm.
Because I really got a sense that the culture that you guys are building and have built is very mission driven in nature, and there are a lot of values that you hold very dearly. In fact, the lecture that you guys took was on morals and ethics, so maybe
Hmm.
you could share a little bit about the culture of the company.
Yeah, I mean, here at Psycraft, one thing that's a very important part of our culture is security. We have highly secured systems. We work in a secure work environment, and that means that certain conveniences that people might be used to are not available. And part of the reason for that is the actual security measures themselves. But part of it is also so that you have a security mindset, because at the end of the day, no matter how many different layers of technical cybersecurity we build our systems underneath, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the people who are using those systems and them maintaining and practicing security. So security is a big thing. Um, I would say that we demand that people work hard and that people are excellent, because what we're doing is so important. I mean, this is not just some get rich quick scheme where we start a company, try to sell it to investors, exit. This isn't something we're doing just for fun. We are building technology to turn simple robots into intelligent fighting machines, and that means that it has to work. There was actually a paper that I read recently. It was written by NASA. It was about mission critical code and about coding practices for mission critical code, and that's the kind of thing that we're interested in. Is things being I don't want to say perfect, because nothing's perfect, but things being done in a way that's just excellent. That being said, though, um, we always like to be friendly. We always like to be polite. Politeness is very important for us. To just be calm and to take things in stride and to not, get really worked up about anything, to not, let things get to you. I think that there's so many trials and tribulations in business. But again, I think about those people suffering in the trenches. I mean, if they can deal with literal bullets and bombs, if something happens to us, whatever it's going to be, we're going to walk away intact. Um, so let's just deal with it and be calm. And so just being calm and serious and professional, and secretive and secure, those are the values that we're trying to bring to Psycraft. I don't know if a lot of other startups are like that, but not a lot of startups are like Psycraft. So
Right, right. And 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 the one thing that I was thinking about is all the discussions you have with, let's say, VCs or team members who you are trying to recruit and hire. What kind of vetting process or what kind of questions do you guys discuss with all stakeholders who are trying to either partner with Psycraft or who are trying to join Psycraft or be its customer? Like, if you could give, like, I understand that security is deeply embedded in the culture, so
yeah.
how do you kind of figure out if a stakeholder or a team member understands that mindset? uh, do you guys have like a way of vetting people, I would say? to kind of figure it
Yeah, I
out?
mean, we absolutely have ways of vetting people, and part of the reason for that is there are legal requirements. We have to do certain things like conducting background checks and stuff like that. I'm not in charge of that process, so I can't really share like all the details about that. But for me, as a CEO, when I'm just trying to see, there's what we have to do from a legal perspective, which is not, we do more than what we have to do from a legal perspective. And there's the technical element of that. But a big part of it for us is, where are people's loyalties? Is this someone who really believes in what we're doing, who really wants to be a part of Psycraft, who believes in our mission? Or is this someone who is more loyal to themselves? I mean, everyone should be loyal to themselves. These are employees, they're being paid for their labor, or in the case of investors and other stakeholders, they are looking to get a return. But what we're most concerned about is that someone might be drawn to someone who's trying to take advantage of their position. The other thing is we have internal checks and balances with respect to security. So just because you join doesn't mean you have access to every bit of information. There's even things that I can't tell investors because it's simply, we operate on a need to know basis, which means if you don't need to know it, you don't know it. And sometimes it can be a little bit, people, it's hard to say what someone truly needs to know or doesn't need to know. But we do make it clear to people that if we're not telling you something, it's not because we don't trust you. It's that we don't want to trust you. We don't want to need to trust you. That's better for you, and it's better for us. So people who have that mindset, people, I mean, one thing that we'll ask about is what sort of personal security they'll practice. Do they do they have a generic password on their computer, or are they a little bit better about that? Are they, giving their credit cards to random websites? Just, and you can get a sense pretty quickly by people's answers, what sort of security, what their security mindset is. And so that's kind of a big part of the vetting process. I can't say too many details about like all of the questions that we ask more specifically. But I think it's usually, it's not just about how we vet people who come on board. It's also when they come on board, we don't immediately trust them. In fact, we don't ever trust them. We only give them access to what they need to know.
Right, right. And you have talked quite a lot about going to Ukraine in the
Hmm.
lecture as well, and your experience of talking to people who are engaged in the battlefield in real time. Could you give us a sense as to how that started? What made you decide to actually go to Ukraine
Hmm.
to get engaged on a personal level?
Hmm.
And if you could share as much as you can about your experiences and what you learned from there.
Yeah, when we were developing our technology, we understand that when you're starting a new company, you need to go to where the need is the greatest and where people will give you a chance. Right now, you know, warfare is a sort of an interesting thing in that you don't really need your army at all for very long periods of time, and then suddenly you need it all at once, basically. So you can go from very, very slow and bureaucratic and step by step processes to suddenly there's a conflict and all that gets thrown out the window and things are fast and people are looking for solutions and they want them yesterday. So obviously, Ukraine is at war. Ukraine has been at war for some time now. But we knew going into this that this technology is going to be very attractive to Ukrainians, and that we could find a bigger market there and a more people who are willing to give us a chance there, and that's a good thing. They should give a chance to people who have a good idea, but here in Canada, things move quite a bit more slowly. We're certainly willing to work with partners all around the world, and we certainly aren't limited to our in our scope to just Ukraine. But we do also have to find a market and target it, and we've found the Ukrainian market. It was not a difficult decision to come to, given how what a stark situation they're in. So I traveled to Ukraine to attend a number of trade shows where I've tried to sell Praysite, our software. I was met with almost universal interest because, again, they're just looking for solutions and they want them right now. Um, Traveling to Ukraine is quite an experience. I consider myself to be a pretty experienced traveler, but Ukraine is a little bit of a more difficult destination to get to because you cannot fly directly there, and it's a big country. So I've mostly taken the train and the bus from Poland into Ukraine. Even the president of the United States took the train, so I think he had a bit of a better seat than I did. But it's a long journey. I mean, again, though, whenever I was doing that journey, I'd always think to myself, think about the people on the front lines. Think about the people who are suffering. Think about the people who've already suffered, who've already lost someone. What is this? What is Oh, it's tiring to take a long bus ride in the middle of the night. I mean, so what? I can deal with that. I go camping all the time. I can deal with the discomfort and the length of time. And then once you're there, it's a nice country. It's got its pros and cons as a travel destination. Certainly, getting there is the biggest con, but once you're there, it's quite beautiful. It's very interesting. It's got a very interesting subway system, which was built in Soviet times to be partially a nuclear bomb shelter. So it's very deep underground and cavernous, and it has all this fancy art. It's got some beautiful, absolutely stunning old buildings. And history, and it's just a very it's very Eastern European. Obviously, people have a bit of a different way about them, and certainly the language is different, but at the end of the day, it's pretty normal. It's pretty normal. You go there, you get your hotel. There's restaurants, your credit card works, which is not the case in Russia right now, but I haven't been to Russia, so I don't know. And I would recommend it as a destination if you can deal with the travel. But the people there, I mean, to be honest, it's hard. And I've mostly gone also in 2024 and 2025. I wasn't there at the beginning of the invasion. I wasn't there to experience that. I would say that in my reading of the situation is that the mood there is bad and people are not happy. A lot of people have lost a lot. The political developments of recent months have not been very good for Ukraine, and people there are struggling. It's quite difficult, and I just wish that things could be better. But at the same time, people live their lives. Life goes on, and it's very important, I think, for life to go on and for people to be able to have some sort of break from the situation. And for here in Canada, though, we I don't think we always appreciate how good we have it. And I think that part of the reason why I created Psycraft is because we have the talent and expertise here in Toronto to develop top quality AI. In Ukraine, their power grid is getting bombed half the time, right? They don't have the kind of money or the kind of resources or time to develop. I mean, they do have AI in Ukraine, of course, but for us in Toronto, I think that we have the ability and opportunity to develop this kind of stuff that they don't, and that people around the world don't. And this kind of technology could be a great gift to the world as long as we can keep people safe and take them out of harm's way. And that's what I get from my experience in Ukraine, is that this is a really important thing to do.
I would say like you actually going there physically and talking to all the people in the trade shows and the locals. That would do you think that gives you a very unique perspective as to how the culture of Psycraft can be informed and the decisions you make in terms of the product and even in terms of trying to communicate the need of the company's existence overall, like their mission and things. Like how do you think you being there uh, informs all the decisions back in Canada with the team and the company?
Well, I mean, it certainly has brought us a lot of validation, that we've made connections there, that we have contacts there. I don't think any startup should start without some sort of validation from potential customers and clients and such. So we wouldn't necessarily be doing this if we didn't have that validation, right? And when startups start just they think inside their own minds like this is going to work. um, a lot of startups fail, and they probably could learn those lessons a bit earlier. um, but it also, my co-founder once said, a line that I really like. He said, Psycraft shows up. And that's really the kind of culture that I want us to have. We are looking to be a global company. Despite being a very small company so far, we have big ambitions, and we'd like to be a pillar of the global defense industry one day, hopefully. And so that's going to involve a lot of traveling. But that's the thing, is like we will go to the hot spots. We will go to these faraway places. We will go where we need to go to get our solutions to the people who need them. We're not just going to sit here in Canada, screwing around, developing fancy things that look cool and impressing investors with demonstrations. We're going to go even somewhere that's hard to get to so that we can get our technology in the right people's hands. One thing I'll say about the Ukrainians is I think they really appreciate people who actually go to Ukraine, because especially these days, at the beginning of the war, there was a lot of people going to Ukraine, taking photographs and showing off. I mean, I say a lot of people. It's not maybe that many people, but those that crowd of people who was visiting Ukraine has dried up a little bit. Um, but we're not going there because we're trying to show that we can go there. We're going there because we want to connect with the people there, and I think they really appreciate that in Ukraine. Um, and and what we bring back to Psycraft is that culture of seriousness and the mission that we are trying to accomplish. That we have a personal connection with the people that we're trying to help. I think that's very important. As I said, when I started answering this question, for any startup, for any company, you need to have a connection to the market that you're going to serve. You can't just develop it based on some idea you have in your mind. You're not going to last very long if you do that.
Could you maybe double click, however you can, about this idea of validation for Psycraft precisely? Like what do you mean by that? In the sense, how do you guys think about it? And for a defense company, what does validation sound like or look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for us, it just involves discussing the solution with the potential end users. It involves going there, presenting them the idea, and these are not the easiest sales to make, right? This is a very serious industry. A lot of these companies are
Right.
quite large, and they scrutinize these solutions a lot because they're planning on using them potentially on the front line. People's lives are on the line. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't experiment. There have been many startups, and in fact, Ukraine is full of defense tech startups in a way that Canada isn't. So
Right.
it's not that you can't do it, but it's hard, right? You especially when you don't have all that much time to impress them. You So for us, validation is it really isn't much more than showing our solution and answering questions. And when you answer every single question and you get a response that's positive, there you go. You've been validated.
Right. 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 And I think you have mentioned about the Ukrainian defense industry and the trade shows even in our last conversation. Could you maybe give a sense as to what kind of other services, products, providers are there, which might not be directly competing with Psycraft, but just to kind of give a sense as to what kind of technologies are getting built in
Hmm.
the defense sector for maybe founders who are thinking about starting, maybe not in the AI space, but maybe from a different angle, probably.
Yeah, well, so there is a ton. What I will say is that Ukraine had and still has this post-Soviet large conglomerate based defense industry, and so they're the ones who produce like the tanks and the artillery and a lot of stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of that has been destroyed actually by Russian missile attacks, so they're getting a lot of stuff donated to them, which does distort things a lot. But then there's also this huge startup scene, and the one thing that everyone there or a lot of people there are making is drones. There are like hundreds of companies that are building drones in Ukraine, and they're building massive, massive numbers of drones. And most of these drones are the small quadcopters. When I say drones, I'm mostly talking about small ones. Even some of the bigger ones, most of them aren't the size of even a small plane, and certainly a lot of them are small enough you could carry them in one hand. They're pretty light. They have to be light. They're aircraft. So drones are absolutely everywhere. They went from producing a few thousand drones near the beginning of the war to millions, literally millions of drones are being produced. And it's not like they had this huge pre-existing industry. As I said, a few thousand. Um, so they're producing millions and millions of drones, and there's all sorts of varieties of drones, and there's all sorts of solutions. And our solution is just is it's mostly targeted at their drone companies, and there's a ton of them, as I said. Um, but they're trying lots of different things. There's a lot of GPS-free navigation. And in general, getting through jamming, because the biggest vulnerability that drones have on the front line is jamming. But to get to why they're producing millions of them is because they discovered at the beginning of this conflict that these drones are just really, really, really effective. Um, when
Right.
Russia invaded, they, Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine has been characterized by trench warfare. And I've been reading John Keegan's excellent history on the First World War. And what happened in the First World War, when that war began, is the armies of the time had this way of fighting that came mostly from the Franco Prussian War. And it was all about timetables, it was about getting their soldiers to the front lines aboard trains and then marching them on their 2 feet. And then there would be a big decisive battle like the Battle of Sedan, and whoever won that battle would win the war,
Right.
basically. They looked at new technologies that were developed, and it wasn't that they were unaware of them, but they had certain biases, and so they interpreted those technological developments to confirm their biases. So, for example, they saw that high powered explosives made artillery more powerful. They thought that meant that forts, which were big prior to the Great War, were no longer useful. They saw aircraft as being useful for scouting on the offensive, but they didn't anticipate things like barbed wire and machine guns, which made
Right.
these decisive offensive actions very difficult and impossible, basically. And so the same thing has
Right.
happened with this war. We now live in a very 20th century mindset, and the 20th century was characterized by large armored columns thrusting, penetrating lines and going deep behind the enemy lines. We saw that in World War II, obviously, in the Six-Day War, and in a number of conflicts, the Gulf War, wars, I should say. And so that's how Russia approached the invasion of Ukraine. But what they discovered is that drones are very effective at destroying these heavy armored vehicles because they're very fast and they're very cheap.
Right.
They're available in massive quantities, and so you have a few $1,000 drones destroying
Right.
multi-million-dollar armored vehicles, artillery, air defenses, even. Um, that is a very cost effective trade. And
Right.
so with the drones just everywhere over the skies of the front line, it's become
Right.
impossible for anyone to move. They're not just effective at destroying; they're
Right.
effective at reconnaissance. So if you try to gather your forces in a particular spot, they're just discovered immediately, and and you can't launch that attack. So it's a lot like the First World War in that case. In this case, is that people can't launch any successful decisive attacks. So it just goes back to trench warfare again. It's not Trench warfare is a symptom of people not knowing how to fight, or at least not developing the technology that allows them to go on decisive offensives. And so the biggest technology to defend against drones, as I just said, is jamming. Because these drones have very poor receivers and transmitters. So if they get jammed, they're basically useless because the pilots can't operate them. And actually, 80% I heard at somewhere, 80% of the drones that are used in Ukraine are lost due to jamming. But they keep using them because they're just so effective that even if you lose 4 out of every 5 drones, they're still useful. They're still cost effective, and they've developed a number of solutions to get through jamming. More powerful transmitters. One of the most recent developments, literally in the past few months, is fiber optic wires. So they'll actually trail these long, 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 like I think hundreds of meters long cables from the ground control station to the drone, and that's been really effective. But that just goes to show how desperate they are to get through jamming, because that sounds like a pretty weird way to fly an aircraft with this long cable. And what our product, PreySight, our computer vision AI, allows for is it allows for the ultimate solution to jamming, because all of the target identification is happening on board on the computer, and then the computer can be programmed to do whatever the developer of the drone wants. And at that point, there's no signal, there's no wire, there's no wireless signal. It truly is truly autonomous and automatic warfare. And so that's why we hope to get our software in the hands of these companies and onto the front lines as soon as possible. I'm not saying we're going to win the war for Ukraine, but it could provide a very, very powerful solution to the jamming problem.
Right, right. And when you are talking about drone warfare,
Hmm.
I don't think even I can possibly understand the new strategies and styles of warfare that are already happening, because I don't think the normal person, even someone like myself, is very, I would say, in tune with the technologies that are already getting developed. And so maybe could you paint a picture as in what kind of warfare styles are already possible,
Hmm.
and how the styles of warfare are evolving going forward, and how can a country like ourselves, which is Canada, and any country, I would say, can prepare themselves for this evolving nature of warfare, which is
Hmm.
very technically enabled, I would say.
What I would say is that you know, the difference between robots in general, like a drone is a type of robot. It's a flying robot, and in fact, another development is unmanned ground vehicles. UGVs are starting to become more and more popular on the front
Right.
lines. And so, what we're seeing is that the technology that's used by people, the vehicles and aircraft used by people, is just really expensive, and it's just not cost effective to have multi-million-dollar helicopters, when a multi-thousand-dollar drone, it might not be able to do the same job as that helicopter. But how many drones could you buy? You could buy thousands of multi-thousand-dollar drones for the same price as a single helicopter. And thousands of drones, you could just imagine how much damage you could do, how much surveillance you can do with that many drones. And so we're moving into an era where we will see millions, maybe even billions of drones in certain. I mean, you could imagine a country like China, for example, producing billions of drones. So we're moving into an era where there's going to be so many drones and other types of robots. We've also seen I don't know how much they cost, incredibly expensive warships in the Russian Black Sea Fleet being sunk by USVs, unmanned surface vehicles, so basically water drones. And so that's another trend. So the rules are just being completely rewritten. I don't even know what we're going to see. One thing I will say though is that here in Canada, it's not very likely that we are going to be competitive at manufacturing millions and millions of drones. The Ukrainians can do that. We can try, but I don't think that's going to be where Canada really contributes. What we do have here in Canada is we have the expertise to develop the software that those drones can run, because when you have that many entities, that many units on the battlefield, it's just going to get out of the control of human beings to control individual ones. Of course, human beings will always be in control and setting the goals for them, but we just don't. I mean, if you had millions of drones, if every one of those drones had a pilot, you need millions of people. And flying a drone is not easy. It's actually quite difficult to do it well, like flying an aircraft, right? So the warfare that we're going to see in the future is going to involve just clouds and of not just drones but also ground vehicles fighting each other. And what we can contribute is we can contribute the AI and other types of software that we can produce here in Canada and distribute around the globe very easily, and that will allow us to, not just profit from the trends, but also we are a very reliable and solid country that you can depend on, and you can rely on us for your software updates in a way that you might not be able to for other countries. And so that's what Canada can contribute, is our expertise in AI and software for the wars of the future that are simply going to be beyond the human mind to comprehend.
Right, right. If we talk about Canada, there has been a lot of development on the defense policy end, where we can kind of see that that interest and incentives are getting aligned with
Hmm.
this changing nature of warfare. So,
Hmm.
could you maybe share how you think about that realignment? I would say, and how Psycraft kind of positions itself with this changing nature of the not just a defense warfare, but also maybe the policies that the Canadian ecosystem is finally adopting, or I think they have already adopted with the Arctic policy last year.
Well, what I would say is that there's quite a lot of talk in that area. I don't want to say too much about anything regarding government policy, but there's more talk than there is actual changes and actual developments. Unfortunately, because it's a lot easier to see something is broken than to identify the solution. I think that Psycraft, we have identified a lot of solutions. We have a lot of ideas about where this technology can go and how to use this technology, but not everyone shares our mentality. So there was a government report, I forget its name, recently released that was talking about how to modernize the defense industry with AI. But reading it, we can tell that the people who wrote it clearly didn't really know that much about the technology, and it sort of was like, well, where can we use AI in defense? Well, everywhere, and in this sort of very vague way. In particular,
Right,
there's been a lot of interest in LLMs and in that kind of generative AI. I think LLMs are a very interesting technology that I'm sure has a lot of uses. I would not say that when you're thinking about drones and robots fighting each other, that generating text is the first thing that I would give them the ability to do. They can communicate
right,
with perfectly normal computer interprocess communication protocols. And with respect to what they have to do, they have to identify their targets, they have to issue orders and commands, they have to fly or navigate the world around them. LLMs probably don't fit into that very well. So I think that there maybe has been an incorrect emphasis, and an emphasis that really is still about soldiers. I think that the mentality in most militaries is that warfare is ultimately boils down to the soldier and his rifle, and that's like the
right, right,
fundamental unit. But that won't be the fundamental unit. It'll be the drone or the robot or
right,
some sort of basic
right,
robot will be the fundamental unit of combat. And I don't think that mentality has been adopted. I think that there's a lot of
right,
people who
right,
maybe want to look like they're on top of the trends, but
right,
I don't know if they've really taken it to heart. I mean, World War One, bringing that example back again, um, there were warning signs preceding the Great War that things weren't going to go the way they wanted them to. The American Civil War, the Crimean War, the Russo-Japanese War, and the Boer War, I think, is most often cited. Um, as that showing that these columns of British troops marching into South Africa to look for the Boers were dealt a number of serious blows early on in that war and could only win it with overwhelming force. And one thing that the British learned in that war, was that their bright red uniforms made them very easy targets for the Afrikaner snipers, so they adopted khaki uniforms. Now, the information was there. Clearly, the camouflage was more important because of high powered rifles. But when the British Expeditionary Force deployed to France to defend against the German invasion, the French made fun of them for their khaki uniforms that they'd adopted. Very quickly, the French realized that they needed to change the colors of their uniforms. All armies needed to change the colors of their uniforms. But the Boer War happened about 10 years prior to the First World War, and I fear that we may be in a situation in the NATO states and just in the world in general, where we can see the war in Ukraine, and there's a lot of noise, particularly from Ukraine, about how this is the future, but it's not being adopted. I saw a report recently that I forget the name, but the U.S.'s main procurement program for small drones put in an order between 2023 and 2026. They're going to order 936 small quadcopter type drones. There might be another program to order another 1,700. Ukraine is using tens of thousands a month. I mean, 936 in 3 years. The U.S. military recently opened up its first drone school for small quadcopters. I mean, drones should be part of basic training in the US military. And I doubt in Canada we're very far ahead of them. There should be more drones than soldiers and I'm not talking about AI enabled drones, I'm not talking about any of the Psycraft technology, just with normal pilot flown quadcopter drones. There should be one per soldier at least, and there isn't, and there's no plans on adopting that. And you could say, well, maybe we have different needs than the Ukrainians or whatever. I think that will sound a lot like the French saying that their uniforms look way nicer than the British uniforms if it ever comes to a serious conflict. And so I don't think that these lessons are really being adopted, but they will be, whether the people want to or not. It was only after World War One that the generation that actually fought that war really learned to embrace the technological developments. And so when they fought World War II, they fought it very differently than their fathers had, and with very different tactics, and were a lot more effective.
In a way, the intelligence is there, the lessons are there, but not necessarily people will pick them up and actually implement
Because they
in the
don't
real world.
want to fight. Like the people who fought World
Right.
War One, they were very aristocratic, and they had this idea of warfare that came from Napoleon, from Moltke, that it was about moving the chess pieces around the board, and those pawns were people, and they treated them like that. They didn't trust, for example, one thing that's happened since those times is small unit tactics. We actually train individual riflemen and squad, team members to, take a bit of initiative. Back then, it was about getting them in a line and pushing them forward. There was no sense of trusting the lower ranks. And it was because that's what they wanted to do. They didn't want to fight a long, grinding campaign in in France. They didn't want to fight in a way that trusted their peasant conscripts to make decisions on their
Right.
own. They used millions of horses in World War One, and again, it's because they came from that sort of old medieval aristocratic background where horses were seen as very manly and powerful. They didn't want to embrace armored vehicles. They had to. They did eventually, but it took them a lot longer than it should have. And I fear that we might be in that situation right now where people look at the conflict in Ukraine and think, yeah, but, you know, that's Ukraine. That's different. If we fought a war, it would be a lot more like what we're used to, and it would be like the war we want to fight, not the
Right.
war that we're going to fight. And so I don't know what the solution to that is, other than making efforts to convince people and time. Eventually the right tactics will prove themselves. It could be either the easy way, or unfortunately it could be the hard way, as the Ukrainians are learning right now.
Right. And do you guys at Psycraft kind of see? I would say this is an advocacy problem, an education problem, uh, and less of a technical problem. So do you kind of see Psycraft's role in kind of advocating for the right methods, like trying to translate your experience and understanding from your visits to Ukraine and working with the stakeholders there, and kind of trying to figure out how you can translate that understanding to in a language that, let's say, lawmakers or decision makers in Canada, or the industry heads in Canada can kind of understand. Do you kind of see that as a
Absolutely.
role? Yeah, right, right.
Absolutely. I mean, this is why I, am very interested in appearing on podcasts such as your own. I'm always willing to look for ways of getting the message out there. What we have in Psycraft is, we have Ukrainian team members actually. We have people working for us in Ukraine. So we're very, very closely connected to Ukraine, but we're a Canadian company. We're here in Toronto. So we are able to really bring that perspective back here. We're also working on very cutting edge technology like AI and other types of software. And so we're able to really anticipate these technological developments, not just report on them. There were people who could see that World War I wasn't going to go the way it was supposed to, but they weren't listened to. And so we're absolutely interested in discussing with all sorts of stakeholders in anywhere really, because ultimately this technology that we're trying to develop will save people's lives. Will replace soldiers with robots, and that is absolutely something that we would like to do, and we'd like to develop that technology here in Canada, because one of the things that should be impressed on people is, aside from, is that if this stuff is really effective and we
Right.
don't develop it here in Canada, it's going to be developed across the world. I told you that the U.S. recently ordered 936 small quadcopters. They also launched the replicator program to order thousands of drones, larger drones. That sort of fizzled out. China recently put in an order for 1 million drones. The U.S. has opened up a single drone school. China has opened up. It's hard to know because the information is not doesn't always come out from that country very very well. But China has opened up all sorts of drone schools, and I've seen videos of their drone schools in China, and they're doing some very advanced tactics, like training as squads. And this again, not with AI, just piloted drones, having them fly through all sorts of these obstacle courses so that they just get really good pilots. Of course, Ukraine has multiple drone schools. Think about the U.S. military's budget. They've barely done any of this. And of course, Russia is learning a lot of lessons. It was Russia that invented the fiber optic drone technology that I was talking about earlier, not Ukraine. And so if we don't, and of course, the Russian drones that have been effective at hitting strategic targets in Ukraine, those are the Shahed drones that come from Iran. And so these countries that Canada does not consider to be friendly are the ones that are leading the technological development. And of course, the US is quite ahead of us. So, we if we don't develop these technologies now, we're going to regret it when either us or one of our allies gets into a situation that's serious, and we're going to wish that we'd listened to Psycraft, that we'd listened to Gabe Dublin all those years ago. But it's not just us. There's lots of people who are saying this, and if we can contribute with our voice and our technical expertise, we're always willing. I love having these conversations. It's very interesting for me. So we're always willing to discuss with anyone who listen.
Right, right. I would say that perspective change needs to happen, because I don't think we are in a country, in especially in Canada, where we kind of understand what it takes to actually be at war. Because I don't think any major war has been fought on this particular land. Yes, Canada has been involved in other wars, but because we are not at the battlefield ourselves, I don't that perspective is kind of lost. And
Yeah, yeah, but we did have that perspective. I think lost is the right
right,
terminology, because Canada was built by a number of different people from different parts of the world. The Native Americans, or Native Canadians, I should say, who were here first. The Iroquois. And others, they were the Cree, the Inuit, all these people. They were all very effective. Some of them were very effective warriors. They were very effective hunters. I mean, the plains natives used to dress up in wolf skin and crawl up to bison, which are the most dangerous animal in North America, to scare them and hunt them. I mean, they were absolutely fierce people. The Cree would hunt a beaver under a frozen lake in the middle of the winter. The Inuit hunted seals and other large marine mammals. I mean, they were fierce, tough people. And when European and particularly French settlers came, traders, they learned from the natives. They learned they learned about the canoe and traveled all up and down Canada trading and hunting. And we also had a big fishing industry. And so when World War I broke out, we were famous for our military. It wasn't the biggest in the world, and it didn't have the most equipment, but our light infantry took from our tradition of woodsmen and hunters and was considered elite and very effective. We also had one of the large in World War II, I believe. We had one of the largest navies in the world, and of course that draws from our tradition of fishing. And so Canada did in the past have a very effective army for what we had, for the resources we had available. And after World War II, we had the Avro Aero program. We were not just tough woodsmen and fishers. We also had some very advanced technologies. The Avro Aero was competitive with Soviet and U.S. Fighter jets in the 1950s, but unfortunately, under American and British pressure, we canceled that program. We are a leader in space technology. We always have been, but a lot of those space technology firms have been bought up by American companies. We're also a world leader in nuclear technology. And so any large nation that thinks that it could threaten the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Canada should know that we could very easily build a nuclear weapon right here in Canada if we wanted to. But of course, we haven't, right? But our ability to be a cutting edge leader in military technology and to have a powerful, effective army, it's not something that it's something that has been lost. Uh, excuse me, it's something that has been forgotten, but it hasn't been
right,
lost. We still have that inside of us, and if only we can remember it, I think that we will be a country that will be a leader in the 21st century and the new way of fighting that is being proven in Ukraine. And we have a very strong connection to Ukraine just because so many Canadians have Ukrainian heritage as well.
right, right, right. And how do you propose this new perspectives are kind of becomes the mainstream, I would say? How do you think that change happens? I understand that we are already working on the technical side of things, but how do we work on the advocacy side of things?
I think that listening to Ukrainian voices and listening to their experiences, you know, we, there have been lots of stories from the NATO's attempts to help Ukraine, and that has included training Ukrainian troops. There was this one actually famous story where a German army unit was training a Ukrainian army unit. And they were asked about how to deal with minefields, because, of course, minefields are all over the place in this war, unfortunately. And the German army unit said, you just go around it. And the Ukrainian said, you can't just go around these minefields. They're vast. And they had no answer for them. And so I don't know if we should be training the Ukrainian troops. I think especially when the war is over and those troops can come home, we should bring them here to Canada to train our troops. And so that would help a lot. And then also just advocacy. I mean, just getting out there, getting the message out there. Podcasts such as your own. I mean, we're always willing to appear. If any podcast host is listening, we're willing to appear on these podcasts. But at the end of the day, if we can say as much as we want, if the public won't listen, if politicians won't listen, there's only so much we can do. But that's all we can do is what we can do.
Right, right. Yeah. And on a parting note, maybe you can also share how, if somebody wants to apply to work at Psycraft, how what is the process, and maybe how they can go about that.
Yeah, so we don't have a particular application portal. We have a lot of people who are trying to apply, and we don't have room for everybody. We're trying to keep things lean. However, that being said, we are developing a bit of a mailing list. So that people who we think are a great candidate to work for us, but we don't have room for them, can still keep connected to us and can join us for events. So come to our website. There's a contact form there. Fill it out. We'll get back to you very quickly. We pride ourselves in replying very quickly to everybody. So, I mean, unless they're like spammers or whatever. But we do pride ourselves in that we will reply quickly and promptly. And if you're interested in getting involved, you don't necessarily have to work for us, but you can still be part of our mailing list and have discussions with us. So yeah, just come to our website, fill out the contact form, and if we're interested, we'll let you know.
Thank you. I would say that was awesome.
Thank you.